Jonas Hale stood still in the red dirt square with nothing left in his hand but 22 cents. The crowd burst into laughter as the judge's gavel came down, closing the auction. That rotting barn on the edge of town, something no one had cared about, was now officially his. The pauper just bought a pile of kindling for 22 cents. A wealthy man bellowed, and the laughter erupted again. Among the jeers, the sneer of Silas Crow could be heard. Silas, who owned just about every patch of land for miles around. Jonas said nothing. He just tightened his grip on the rusted key in his palm. He knew he had just bought something the others believed was worthless. The dirt road leading to the barn lay quiet. The wind kicking up dust into hazy little clouds. The building leaned to one side, its warped boards jutting out like crooked teeth. The smell of mold and rust oozed from the crack in the door. Jonas's hand trembled as he slid the latch. The hinges groaned long and low like something crying out in pain. Slivers of light pierced through holes in the roof, cutting through the shadows. And then his heart clenched. Hanging from the rafters were 3 women suspended by ropes. Their dresses were caked in dust. Their legs twitched faintly. The nooses were tight around their necks. They were still breathing barely. Their wide eyes begged for help. They had been left there to die. Jonas staggered back, his chest thundering like it might explode. This was not his business. But as he looked at those gray, gasping faces, he understood. If he turned away now, by morning the town would find 3 corpses swinging in that barn, and he, the man who bought it for 22 cents, would be the only one who knew. Thank you for letting me serve you tonight. Wherever you are listening from, please know I wish you peace and happiness always. Jonas yanked the folding knife from his belt, heart pounding like a war drum. He dragged a wooden stool beneath the beam and slashed through the first rope with a hard swipe of the blade. The young woman dropped limp into his arms, her neck bruised deep purple, breath rasping like a candle on the verge of going out. He gently laid her on the floor, then rushed to the second, and then the third. Each cut filled the air with the bitter scent of scorched hemp, sweat, blood, and something worse. Despair. They were alive, but just barely. Jonas dropped to his knees, his callous hands pressing against each chest, whispering prayers he had not spoken since the war. Then, a cough tore through the silence from the first girl. A second later, the second woman gasped for air. The youngest, smallest of the 3. Hair-soaked and matted, parted her cracked lips and mumbled, do not let him know we are still alive." The words were weak, scattered, but they froze Jonas to the bone. Him, who the hell was he? And why had these 3 been left to hang in the barn folks in town had long written off as a worthless shack? Jonas pulled an old blanket from the corner of the stall and laid it over their frail bodies. In the dim light, he saw every bruise, every lash mark across their backs. This was no drunken rampage. This was deliberate. Outside, the sun was dying behind the mountains, casting a blood-red streak across the sky. Jonas stood in silence, staring across the brittle grass fields. Part of him wanted to walk away, just like the rest of the town always did. But the other part, the part that once fought under a flag in a war far from here, refused to turn its back. He thought of Silas Crow, the land baron, rich as sin, always present at every auction, always outbidding folks just trying to keep their homes. Silas had laughed hard when Jonas spent his last 22 cents on this barn. And now in that same barn, Jonas had uncovered the kind of wickedness the whole town pretended not to see. He did not know who these girls were or where they had come from. But one thing was certain. If word of this got out, Silas would come and he would bring the kind of men who did not mind spilling blood for a few extra dollars. Jonas did not have many guns. He did not have many friends either. All he had was a weathered tent on the edge of town and an old service pistol from the war. He looked once more at the 3 young faces beneath the torn blanket. Maybe they were from one of the native tribes. Maybe they were daughters of folks who had dared to stand up to Silas. He did not know, but he understood one thing clearly. The moment he cut those ropes, their fate became his. Inside the damp old barn, the small oil lamp Jonas had lit cast a trembling glow, revealing the gaunt faces of the 3 young women. Their breathing was starting to steady, but still sounded like it came from someone who had just clawed their way out of the grave. The eldest girl managed to sit up first, her black hair tangled and falling over her shoulders. Her brown eyes held something between fear and fury. Her voice was hoarse, but firm. "You should not be here. Anyone who tries to help us ends up dead." Jonas knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. His voice was steady, deep, and warm. "This barn belongs to me now. I paid 22 cents every last one I had, and I am not leaving you here." The second girl, small in frame, but with eyes that burned bright, gripped his trembling hand tightly. She whispered, "We are the daughters of Jacob Merrick, the farmer who refused to sell his land to Silas Crow. They beat our father to death and us. They brought here to be made an example of." Her words hit Jonas like a knife to the gut. He remembered Jacob Merrick, a hard-working tenant farmer who had vanished suddenly last spring. The townfolk never spoke of it, pretended he had never existed. Now the truth hung here before him. The youngest, the frailest, forced out broken words. They wanted us to die in silence. Anyone who asked was threatened. No one dared speak. Jonas clenched his jaw. His eyes burned with a quiet fire. In the war, he had seen flags hoisted high to send a message to the enemy. Now, Silas was using these three girls as his flagpole, one flying the banner of fear. Outside, the wind howled through the warped wooden beams. Somewhere in town, a dog howled in the night. Jonas knew it was only a matter of time before Silas realized his prey had survived. And when that happened, he would come with knives, with pistols, and with all the dirty rules he had written himself. Jonas rose, pulled the plank across the window, and said in a voice like iron, "Listen to me. This place is no longer a tomb. It is mine now, and you are going to live, but I need to know everything. Who put those ropes around your necks? Which of Silas's men did this?" The oldest girl looked him straight in the eye. In the flickering light of the oil lamp, her gaze burned. It was him. Silas Crow himself stood right beneath that beam, laughed while we kicked and struggled. He wanted the whole town to see what happens to anyone who dares stand against him. The barn fell silent. Only Jonas's heavy breathing filled the space. And in that moment, he knew. He had not bought an old barn for 22 cents. He had bought himself a war, one he could not walk away from. Jonas wrapped the threadbare blanket tighter around the three young women, then began pulling them out of the barn, where the damp smoke of burnt rope still clung to the air like a graveyard mist. The dirt road back to a small shack lay on the far edge of town, wavering through the dry fields. Moonlight fell on their frail bodies. Each step felt like dragging stones, but Jonas kept going, guiding them silently like a man leading lost souls out of the dark. Inside his rundown shack, Jonas lit a fire, boiled water, and dug through what little herbs he had left from the war. He cleaned the rope burns on their necks with hands that trembled, yet never faltered. Every swollen bruise felt like a blade sinking deeper into his chest. The oldest girl's name was Mara, her gaze sharp as forged steel. The second, Eliza, small but fierce, kept her arms wrapped protectively around the youngest. Ruth, barely more than a girl, lay pale, her breath wheezing like a saw through old timber. They did not need to speak. Jonas already knew. Their lives were now tied to his. By morning, sunlight pierced through the cracks in the wooden walls, casting a golden wash across the room. Jonas was chopping firewood, sweat soaking through his faded shirt. Mara watched him. Something rare flickering in her eyes. Trust. For months, all they had seen in men's eyes were fear, disgust, or hunger. Now, for the first time, a stranger treated them like human beings. Eliza whispered quietly, "Why are you helping us? You do not owe us anything." Jonas planted the axe in the dirt, wiped the sweat from his brow with a sleeve, and said, voice rough like gravel, "If I walk away from three girls left hanging, then I might as well hang myself." In the firelight of early dawn, Mara gave a faint nod. Something in his voice, his certainty, brought hope back to life, but the danger was far from over. Outside, a few townsfolk passed by, throwing curious glances toward the small shack. Jonas knew word was already spreading. and when it reached Silas Crow, the man would not sit quietly. By late afternoon, Jonas cleaned his old rifle. He swapped the barrel, oiled the parts, and worked in silence. The clicks of steel echoed through the cabin. Mara watched him and said softly, "You cannot fight him alone." Jonas gripped the rifle tight, his eyes cold and gray as weathered iron. "I do not plan to run, but if I have to stand alone, then I will stand." The three girls exchanged glances, fear tangled with a flicker of fragile hope. For the first time since their father was killed, they felt like someone was willing to walk with them into the dark. I truly appreciate your presence here. If this story brought back memories of dusty evenings and the sound of hooves echoing through your heart, then subscribe to my channel. So each day we can sit together once more and I will tell you another tale of the West. Rumors traveled faster than desert wind. Within 2 days, the whole town was whispering about Jonas Hale, the broke old war vet who bought a barn for 22 cents and found something strange inside. Some said he struck gold. Others claimed it was ghosts, women who came back from the dead, but every whisper fell silent the moment someone mentioned the name Silas Crow. Everyone knew he had ears everywhere. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the blood-red mountains, Jonas heard the pounding of hooves outside his shack. He set down his hammer, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle leaning by the door. Mara, Eliza, and Ruth froze in the corner, eyes wide with fear. The door swung open. Silas Crow stepped in. His long coat brushed the floor, carrying with it the scent of cigars, sweat, horses, and blood. 2 burly men flanked him, their hands resting loosely on their holstered guns. Silas wore a thin smile, the kind of smile worn by men who hold life and death in their back pocket. "Jonas Hale," he drawled slowly, circling the cramped little shack. "I hear you found something interesting in that old barn." "Only a fool would waste coin on that heap of rot." 22 cents, huh? But then again, madness often leads to dangerous things. Jonas did not look away. His voice was but steady. "All I bought was a rotting barn. Nothing more." Silas leaned in, his cold eyes locking with Jonas's. "Is that so? Strange. I remember leaving a little message in there. A warning for folks who forget their place. And now I hear someone's been meddling." Ruth let out a faint breath. Eliza clutched her sister's hand tighter. Jonas stepped between them and Silas, blocking their view. "I do not know what you are talking about," he said. He swapped the barrel, oiled the parts, and worked in silence. Silas' smile vanished. He leaned close, voice hissing like a snake. "Listen, Hale, some things are best left buried. If you go digging, the same rope that almost strangled them might find your neck too." He slapped Jonas hard on the shoulder and turned toward the door. But before stepping out, Silas paused, glanced back, and said, "I am giving you 3 days. After that, if you are still holding on to what does not belong to you, then fire will take care of the rest." The sound of hooves faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence thick enough to choke on. Mara whispered, her voice shaking but firm. "You saved us, Jonas. But now, all of us, you and us, we are targets." Jonas stared out at the dry field bathed in twilight. In his eyes, fear was giving way to something else. Resolve. This fight had already begun, and there was no turning back. That night, Jonas sat by the window of his shack, his rifle resting across his knees. The fire in the stove had burned low, casting a dim, flickering glow across his face. Mara and Eliza took turns laying cool cloths on Ruth's forehead, trying to keep her conscious. No one slept. Every distant howl of a dog, every faint hoof beat in the night made their hearts tighten. And just as Silas had warned, he did not wait 3 days. At the break of dawn, Jonas saw black smoke rising from the direction of the barn. He rushed outside, the 3 girls right behind him, eyes wide in horror. The old barn, the place they had barely escaped with their lives, was now a roaring inferno. Flames tore through the rotting wood, howling like demons let loose. In the haze, silhouettes on horseback emerged, 6 of Silas's men holding torches and rifles. They made no effort to hide. This was not an accident. It was a message. Jonas shouldered his rifle, barrel steady. His voice rang out into the morning wind. "This is my land. You have no right to be here." One of the men laughed, waving a torch in the air. "You bought that barn for 22 cents. Still think it was worth it?" Mara suddenly stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You're the ones who hanged us. You murdered my father." The gang roared with laughter until one growled. "Shut your mouth, girl, or we'll string you up again." Jonas pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through the air, striking the dirt right in front of the man's horse. The horse reared back, neighing wildly, nearly throwing the rider. The others froze. Jonas stood tall, his gray eyes cold and sharp as steel. "Next time, I do not aim for the ground." The fire behind him lit up the night like a torch from hell. The three girls stood behind him thin, trembling, but unbroken. The image made the gang hesitate. But they were wolves, and wolves only know how to bite. One of them drew his pistol, aiming straight at Jonas. The sound of the hammer being cocked rang heavy in the air. Jonas did not think. He yanked Mara and Eliza to the ground and fired. The shot cracked through the still dawn. One man dropped from his horse, screaming, clutching a bleeding thigh. The other five palled. Smoke from the rifle mixed with the burning barn, thickening the sky with ash and fire. In the chaos, Ruth sat up weakly, her voice a hoarse rasp. "Jonas, do not let him take another life." The hoofbeats thundered as the gang turned and rode hard back toward town. They had not won tonight, but Jonas knew. Silas was far from finished. He looked at the barn, now reduced to ashes. Black cinders drifted down like snow, covering the earth. But within that ash, the three girls still lived, still breathed. And Jonas knew then their survival. That was the fire that would burn down everything Silas Crow had built. Black smoke still lingered in the sky as Jonas led the three girls straight into town.